John Brennan was in the Situation Room for the bin Laden raid in his capacity as the president's chief Homeland Security advisor. He's now the director of the CIA. Director Brennan, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning, Chuck. Good to be here.
You know, 5 years ago, I remember going to the White House and hearing cheers, hearing people gather in the streets of Washington, and it was happening in other cities, and there was this sense of relief. It was like this moment of, wow, is this the end? Have we won whatever this was we were fighting, this war with al-Qaeda? Have we won? Boy, it doesn't feel like that way 5 years now, 5 years later.
I remember that same evening when I left the White House about midnight. It was as bright as day outside. Yeah. And the chants of USA, USA, and CIA, CIA. It was the culmination of a lot of very hard work by some very good people at CIA and other agencies. And we have destroyed a large part of al-Qaeda. It is not completely eliminated, so we have to stay focused on what it can do. But now with this new phenomenon of ISIL, this is going to continue to challenge us in the counterterrorism community for years to come.
ISIL's leader is a gentleman by the name of al-Baghdadi. If we announced tonight, if you and the president, announced tonight that he was dead, would there be that same sense of this is the destruction of ISIS? There was this feeling with bin Laden, al-Qaeda, yeah, that's a symbolic move. Al-Qaeda is going to go in the dustbin of history. Same thing with al-Baghdadi? Is he that important?
He's important, and we will destroy ISIL, I have no doubt in my mind. And we have to remove the leadership that directs that organization to carry out these horrific attacks. Bin Laden had very important symbolic as well as strategic significance for al-Qaeda. And it was important after 9/11 that we remove the person responsible for that. If we got Baghdadi, I think it would have great impact on the organization, and it will be felt by them. But this is a large, not just organization, it's a phenomenon. We see it not just in Syria and Iraq, we see it in Libya, Nigeria, and other countries. So we're going to have to remain very focused on destroying all the elements of that organization.
Is ISIS more appealing to jihadis in some ways than al-Qaeda was?
It has set up a so-called caliphate. It has put its roots down in territory. It has been able to attract a number of individuals from outside of that Syria and Iraq area, over tens of thousands of individuals who have traveled to join this so-called caliphate. So I think it has had a resonance, unfortunately, that has appealed to the hearts and minds and souls of individuals who have been misled by their narrative of it being a religious banner.
It was the failure to see ISIS, the rise of ISIS as quickly. Was it an intelligence failure? And I ask it this way. Remember, the president one time referred to them as the JV team. And obviously they're not the JV team anymore. And that's since been a remark, I think, that he regrets and he says was taken a little bit out of context. But was that because the intelligence he was getting seemed to downplay the importance of ISIS at the time?
Well, ISIS comes from al-Qaeda in Iraq, which has been around for the last 10, 15 years. And what we need to do is to understand that ISIL took advantage of a lot of opportunities inside of both Iraq and Syria. The fact that...
Are they opportunities that we gave them?
Well, I think there are opportunities that presented themselves inside of both those countries. When we see that President Bashar Assad was carrying out these horrific attacks against his citizens as part of this Arab Spring and was using chemical weapons, this is something that extremists and terrorists seized upon. So I think ISIS was able to use those instances, whether it be in Syria or Iraq, and abuses and corruption on the part of these governments to appeal to a broad swath of people. And so it gained strength very quickly, quicker than we thought.
Is it, I guess when we look at this, I wonder this, if we just, let's say we get al-Baghdadi, and let's say we destroy ISIS the same way we got bin Laden and we destroy al-Qaeda, does something else just rise in its place? I think that's what the public thinks now at this point, that there's no getting rid of these terrorists, that when you get rid of one organization, another one's going to sprout up.
Well, I think a lot of these organizations have sprouted up for a variety of reasons. One is that there is evil that is manifest in the leadership of these groups. And so they want to just destroy and kill and maim just for the sake of doing it. But also there's a lot of problems in many parts of the world that the terrorists have taken advantage of. Endemic corruption, the lack of good governance, the lack of economic opportunity, the lack of government over different parts of the country where terrorists have been able to go and burrow in and have training camps and be able to launch attacks outside. So although the counterterrorism community has a very important obligation to try to prevent these attacks, we need to give the diplomats and government officials, both here in this country and in other countries, the time and space they need to address some of these underlying factors and conditions that facilitate facilitate and contribute to the growth of these organizations.
I understand. So what should be the U.S. role in this? Because we're having a big debate in this country. It's like how more involved, less involved. And I think the president's tried both, you could argue. He made a decision not to militarily get involved in Syria at a time when he decided not to follow through on the red line. But then he made a decision to get involved in Libya. He regrets Libya, doesn't regret Syria. What does this say about what the U.S. role has to be in creating stability in the Middle East?
I think what it says is that the Middle East is going through a very difficult and complex period of its history. There are a number of trends that are underway, that economic, political, cultural, sectarian, and a lot of these very repressed sentiments and tensions are now manifesting themselves. Authoritarian regimes have been in place in a number of these countries. You mentioned Libya and Syria and Iraq. And so now a lot of the problems that were never addressed during these authoritarian regimes are coming to the fore. And the terrorist groups and extremist groups are again seizing upon it. And we need to take a look at what are those issues that we need to address and help them. But the United States has only limited influence to shape events in the Middle East. And a lot of individuals think that the United States can wave a magic wand, and we can't.
Okay, but let me ask you just about Libya. If we had not got involved in Libya, if Gaddafi were still there, would Europe have this migration crisis? Would it be as bad? I mean, I know you don't like to do hypotheticals, but it does feel that way, that Libya's instability, Syria's instability has now created European instability.
Before the coalition went in and took action against the Libyan regime, there was already underway instability and a growing insurrection against the Gaddafi regime. That was going to play itself out, and we don't know what would have been the case if Gaddafi was able to suppress and repress the group. I find it hard to believe that Gaddafi would have been able to stay in power. But what we're seeing now, again, is the lack of opportunities within these countries for individuals to be able to participate in a modern-day economy, be able to participate in government. So there's a lot of work that these governments have to do. The United States is helping, and we're trying to help, but a lot is going to fall on these governments themselves, the people, as well as just the region as a whole.
Let me ask you about Saudi Arabia. This was part of your portfolio many times in various times that you've been in government, and you were actually just there with the president as director of the CIA, not just before. You were there a lot as a chief advisor to the president for Homeland Security. What is the state of our relationship? How fractured is it?
We have a very strong relationship with Saudi Arabia, and it's on the economic front, the political front, military, security, and intelligence across the board. I have very close relations with my Saudi counterparts.
You do? It's the president anymore.
Oh, the president had very good meetings when he was out there. He had a more than 2 hours meeting with King Salman and some of the senior-most officials of the Saudi government. There are some differences of view about how some of these regional issues should be addressed, and that's very healthy. And in fact, both the president and King Salman said it was a very candid discussion that is necessary among friends.
Last week, I had former Senator Bob Graham on the show. He's been somebody, you probably know this, that has been trying to publicly get more attention to the idea of releasing these 28 pages of a congressional inquiry about 9/11 that have to do with Saudi Arabia and potential role Saudi Arabia does. Why not release those 20? What's the case against releasing those 28 pages?
Those so-called 28 pages of one chapter in this joint inquiry that was put out in December of 2002 was addressing some of the preliminary findings and information that was gathered by this joint commission within the Congress. And this chapter was kept out because of concerns about sensitive sources of methods, investigative actions, and the investigation of 9/11 was still underway in late 2002. I'm quite puzzled by Senator Graham and others because what that joint inquiry did was to tee up issues that were followed up on by the 9/11 Commission, as well as the 9/11 Review Commission. So these were thoroughly investigated and reviewed. It was a preliminary review that put information in there that was not corroborated, not vetted, and not deemed to be accurate.
Are the information in those 28 pages you think are inaccurate information? Just everything that's in there is false?
No, I think there's a combination of things that is accurate and inaccurate. And I think the 9/11 Commission took that joint inquiry and those 28 pages or so and followed through on the investigation. And they came out with a very clear judgment that there was no evidence that indicated that the Saudi government as an institution or Saudi officials individually had provided financial financial support to al-Qaeda.
Are you concerned that the release of those pages will unfairly put the relationship in a damaged position?
I think some people may seize upon that uncorroborated, unvetted information that was in there that was basically just a collation of this information that came out of FBI files, and to point to Saudi involvement, which I think would be very, very inaccurate.
Two more quick questions. One has to do with Europe. A lot of people will travel to Europe this year just like they do, college students. How safe will Americans be in places like Germany this summer?
We know that ISIS is trying to carry out attacks in Europe and in other parts of the globe. Also, we are working very, very closely with our European partners, and our European partners, security intelligence officials, are working around the clock to uncover these terrorist plans. And they've been successful in stopping a number of attacks inside of Europe.
But there are a lot of plans.
There are things that are underway that we are working with them very closely, sharing information to stop these
What
attacks.
keeps you up?
This is what keeps me going. This is what makes me so happy that I'm at CIA. It's the best job in the world, working with dedicated American men and women who are trying to protect their fellow Americans.
Would you consider staying on no matter who the next president is?
Every day, it's up to the president, my wife, and myself to decide whether or not I'm going to stay. And as I said, this is the best job in the world, literally.
Donald Trump, has any of the things he has said about Muslims in particular, has that made your job harder?
I focus on the mission at hand, and I have a lot of things.
American politics does not influence the mission at hand sometimes, maybe with sources and methods and things like that?
I'm not distracted by it. I'm focused on the mission. I'm focused on working with my international partners, working with my colleagues here in the States. The campaign is going to go on, but one of the great things about the CIA is that we stay focused like a laser on what we need to do to keep this country safe and secure.
All right, John Brennan, Director of the CIA, thanks for coming on.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.